It's great to be back here. This is my 11th summit, and I wanted to make sure I was here for the 40th anniversary. Today we'll be talking about the organisations that we work in and what we're doing, as well as sharing some personal insights. We've got so much to talk about, so the bios of our panellists are available in the programme. I'd ask you to check those out. And throughout our session, we will be sharing insights and feedback and tips for you as individuals and firms to take back to help improve diversity in private capital. But to start, given the video and talking about inspiring the next generation, Rebecca, I'd like to come to you because I'd love to hear more about the growth of 10,000 interns and how it's expanded its programme since the summer of 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been the CEO at 10,000 Interns Foundation for a year now, a very, very long and exciting year, and we've done a huge amount. So we started in 2020 as a project, and Dawid, one of my trustees and one of the co-founders as well, got together with a couple of people, Wal included, and said, you know, there's this moment, there's the re-eruption of the BLM movement, what are we going to do? Not talk about, not ruminate on, what are we going to do today? And so the 100 Black Interns project was born out of those conversations, which was, in essence, to create opportunities for young Black students and graduates across investment management, with a focus specifically on this industry. And like all good ideas, it got out of hand very quickly. And so really, in that first summer where we were placing students, this was 2021, already other sectors had got involved and expressed interest. And the program is very simple. It was developed to be frictionless. It's, will you pledge to create a meaningful internship opportunity, at least 6 weeks? And will you pay the student a local living wage at a minimum? And lots of people said yes, and they did it, which was amazing. And flash forwards 3 years, we are halfway towards that 10,000 number. We've created 5,000 paid internships to date across 35 different sectors with 700 organizations, and it's expanded from investment management across the whole spectrum of UK industry. And we've also just launched a program for disabled students and graduates of all ethnicities, using the model to do the same thing, create meaningful access to opportunity. Why? Because talent is everywhere, and we know this, but opportunity isn't. And so that industry insight is the thing that changes, as you heard Tolo talking about that trajectory, it changes your mindset. And it also changes the firms that these interns go into. You know, that energy, that change of personality, what we call untraditional talent, is the thing that can start to change hearts and minds. And that goes a long way to changing culture as well. So we are on a journey. We're at base camp. We've been super ambitious, method and metrics focused. You guys love numbers. And so do we. So it's been an incredible journey to date, but we're just getting started.
Thank you. So Dawid, as one of the co-founders of 10,000 Interns, what advice would you give to firms about how to run a successful internship program?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to understand that when you take an intern in or a number of interns in from the internship, you're addressing one of the kinks in the hose pipe. And what I mean by that is, you know what it's like, it's a hot summer's day and you're watering the garden and you've got a beer in hand, it's all good, and then suddenly the water stops. And so you go to the tap and you think, you know, who turned the tap off? That's crazy, why would you do that? And the tap's on. So you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. The tap's on, there's no water. And then you realize there's a kink in the hose pipe. So you go looking, you find the kink, you unkink it, you go back, you pick up the hose. Still no water. You know, that doesn't make any sense. The tap's on, there's kink's gone, why no water? And then you realize there's several kinks. And so now you go kink hunting, you unkink all the kinks, anyone who's ever watered a lawn, and suddenly the water flows and it's a beautiful thing. And life is a bit like that for many people. There are these kinks in the hose pipe and they just kind of come out of nowhere. So my own personal example, I was 24 years old. I was applying for tenancy, for pupillage at the bar. I just qualified, I think I was 23. I mean, I was a kid basically. And sorry, anyone here who's 23, I didn't mean that. But you know what I mean. So I was young. And I applied for this pupillage, and I got it. But they basically said, because after pupillage you want tenancy, and they said, look, we got this little wrinkle, this little thing, tiny little thing, but hope you don't mind. But we can't take you on for tenancy. You can do the pupillage, which is 6 months, but after that you're going to have to find tenancy somewhere else. And they said the wrinkle is this: we took on a black guy last year, and we just can't do it 2 years in a row. and we just can't. We'd love to, but we can't. And so you can come and do the pupillage. So I did. I never knew else to go, so I went. But I tell you that because it's a kink in the hose pipe, right? Everything's good. You're doing your thing. It's all cool. You pass your exams. You're good. But then there's this kink. But there's not just one. There's several kinks in the hose pipe. And the 10,000 Interns program is addressing one particular kink, which is how do you break into this illustrious, incredible set of organizations? How do you get in when your face doesn't fit your name, your name doesn't chime? And so how do you make it successful? You take it really seriously. You understand that this is one kink. You plan it. You get some data around it. If you don't hire the intern, why didn't we hire this person? If you do, why? You feed it back to Rebecca and her amazing team. But you plan this thing. I mean, every now and again, we'll find interns will show up and they don't really no one's planned it. There's not really anything for them to do. There's been, they're there. But in reality, no one's really thought about it in that much detail. So take it really seriously. You're unkinking one kink, but then there's a whole bunch of others that you need to think about as well.
Yep, absolutely. And Rebecca, what would you add to that?
Again, how long do we have? I think the most important thing is to really understand that competency and kind of culture fit aren't the same thing. And so oftentimes I speak to hiring managers and, they'll tell me, well, there was just a kind of 20% competency gap and we just didn't really think. And these people are 18, like they've never had a job. How can there be a competency gap? And so I think a lot of people start to suffer from what is the pervading culture in their workplace, which is oftentimes quite a narrow offering and oftentimes looks the same, sounds the same, walks and talks the same. And unfortunately, for all of those people who run organizations, thinks the same, right? And so you're not getting that diversity of thought through and into your organization if you are hiring cookie cutters of people who went to Oxford, like me. When you are making those decisions, you have to really be critical about what you're looking at and why you think there's a competency gap. Because if it comes down to culture fit, you need to really reassess how much difference your business can tolerate. And that should be the challenge. So in order to make something like this work, it's thinking about why are we turning this person away? And if it's down to something that we can change internally, then we've got to do that. Yes, sometimes it's the case that someone doesn't have the right degree or they haven't studied the right thing, but oftentimes work experience is just that. It's giving someone talented an opportunity to, change their mind, experience something new. I mean, I still remember my first internship and it was crazy, the world of work. But it's that thing that somebody needs and it could change their life. And so culture fit is not the same as competency, and talent really is everywhere.
Absolutely. I still remember my first internship vividly as well. And just following on from this, Addie, so as an industry, private capital has been hiring more women, people from diverse backgrounds. And we all know inclusive environments are necessary for people to succeed, to stay, to thrive. What do firms do that creates real change and impact?
Yeah, I mean, if I just start by building on what Rebecca and Dawid have said, but before we move on to firms, I'd just start with the individual. And I think two things, one thing from each of you that you've said that makes me think about what we as individuals can do differently. The first is we talk a lot about what are the classifications of diversity, and I'm pretty clear in my head where they are, but one of the important ones is socioeconomic diversity. And if I come to what you were saying about someone walking in, you go, you've got a 20% gap. I think a lot of the gap at the age of 18 or even 21 or 23, frankly, comes down to what your socioeconomic background was. Did you go to the kind of school where people came in and talked in a certain way, presented a kind of way? Where's your confidence level sit? What kind of language and vocabulary might you use? Do you make direct eye contact? And I think on a personal level, if we can all start thinking in diversity in slightly broader terms than gender, skin colour, ethnicity, all of which are important. But I think some of those other ones, on a personal level, we can challenge ourselves. We can start to be more open-minded about where we find great talent from. And the second is to what Dawid said, which is, I think access to network, especially for high potential people, is everything. And the way we think about that at Adelpha and what we encourage investment managers and funds to do is to say, if someone ever contacts me who basically I don't think has a network already, I'll give them 15 minutes of my time. I don't, like with everyone else here, I don't have enough to give 9 hours a week away. But if I roughly look at someone and go, your father's probably not a CEO, your godfather probably doesn't run a VC fund, I'll at least be that first bridging gap that this first person says, yeah, I'll walk along the river with you and have a chat. And I'll see if I can pass you on another way. So that's personal. And then I'll give you a quick answer to the question you actually asked. What can firms do? There's infrastructure stuff. And I personally have benefited absolutely from coaching, access to certain off-sites that have helped me think about certain developments and strategy. For me, I think the biggest leverage is line managers. It's in the behavior of the instant relationships. And I think access is everything. If I think about what really made differences in my career, I basically started smoking at Goldman Sachs so I could get 7 minutes with partners. It was like the guy who used to offer me a lift to work and back. But that ability to have 7 or 8 minutes aside, build rapport, build trust, something was going wrong for me, I could talk to you about it. I had a quick I still don't understand what call options are. Please, can you explain it to me privately and don't tell anyone I don't know the question. I think that matters a lot. And I think finally, organizationally, feedback is critical. And there's 2 types of feedback. The first is if you're running a fund or a firm, make sure you ask the question of the juniors, the high potentials, the diverse. There is no one who's going to be working in any of your companies who's not intelligent enough to know the bits that they don't enjoy and what they would like to be done differently or what they do differently. The difference is they're not often asked. And when they are asked, they're often not confident enough to give the answer. And the second is, to women or minorities or diverse talent, you have to give them feedback. And I don't have any stats to back this up, but what I'm clear about is people give feedback more directly to sort of white men of a certain background than they do to others. And that doesn't give people the opportunity to grow.
Thank you. So Rebecca, I'd like to get your thoughts on inclusive environments too. In particular, what can firms do to support people with disabilities? And what have the learnings been from 10,000 able interns so far?
Yeah, we're at the beginning of our journey in the disability space, and it's been incredibly interesting to see the intersectionality coming through, people eligible for the 10,000 Black Interns program and the 10,000 Able Interns program, and then looking at the way that socioeconomic status plays into that. And I think the key learning for us has been around the open communication and the transparency between ourselves and the interns that apply to our program, and then the firms that are, trying to kind of test and push themselves into this space, knowing that they might not feel disability confident, but they actually want to make an effort to understand where the gaps might be or where they're going wrong. And I think the main issue that we see, which is why the disability employment gap is at its biggest point now since 2018, is because people are not disclosing, because the cultures are not such that they are encouraged to disclose. And if they are disclosing, workplace adjustments or reasonable adjustments that might help them do their job a little bit better or easier or might facilitate, their access to work are not being granted fast enough. And so what happens, obviously, you see somebody who experiences social impairment or disability watch someone else disclose and not be taken seriously, not be heard, not receive any kind of real help or assistance. And then they think, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put myself in that position and then take on mantle of shame that goes with that, or people treating me differently or not giving me feedback. And so it becomes this kind of vicious cycle. And I think culture has become such a sticky buzzword, and people think it's this really kind of complicated, intangible thing, but culture is just what happens when no one's looking, right? It's the comment that someone makes about the ethnic food in the fridge, or the way that somebody looks at your hair, or, when somebody just offhand says, oh, just take the stairs, and you can't. And so it's all of these tiny moments that impact and shape the way you feel at work. And I think for disabled people specifically, there's not enough representation, right? And so that's the thing that is going to really, really change the culture on this. If there are more people who have to stand up and say, this is my experience, right? And being first is very difficult.
Yeah. Can I jump on that quickly? I think there's a real positive opportunity with that, which is leadership from the top, which is, I think especially in the city, most senior leaders are pretty neurodiverse and certainly have familiarity with mental health issues and problems and anxieties. And I think if senior leaderships can talk openly on those sorts of items, I think it changes very quickly the culture all the way through. And just to add to that, I did a talk to senior execs at a FTSE 100 company. My first question was, can I ask people to put their hand up if you think you identify in any way as a minority, you've had any personal experience with mental health, or you would classify yourself as having any neurodiversity? And in a room of 100, not a single person put their hand up. And I turned to the board table on my right and said, you have a problem. I wasn't expecting lots, but that is problematic. Because what are you doing culturally for your organisation if even amongst peers, the senior execs can't?
No one wants to say anything.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real positive opportunity from that, rather than, it's not about just smashing out the negatives. There's such a leadership opportunity there.
Yeah, I'm just to jump in on that as well. I think this leadership point is huge. You know, there's a Russian psychologist called Yuri Bronfenbrenner who he died in 2006, but he said it was about children. I love this. When I first heard this, I kind of welled up. And if I ever get inked, I don't have any ink, but if I ever do, it's probably going to say this. But he said, every child needs in their life at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about them. And that makes all the difference. And that's just a huge, huge truth. And I see it wherever I go. And I think it's that kind of a mindset. So we're not talking about children here, but we are talking about people who are still young. And when you talk to people like Tolu, for example, who was in the video, you know, all it takes is one opportunity and the game just changes. And it's about being that irrationally crazy CEO, irrationally crazy about these people who are coming into your firm, as opposed to, you know, we'll take them in because it's a good thing to do and it's the S in ESG, so we'll do it. But instead you have this kind of burning passion to change these people's lives and to recognize that they could be someone, they could be a contender, they can go somewhere. And it can just be this 6-week thing, and it just changes the game for them, it changes their entire horizon, and says, I can climb that mountain. It comes from the top. I often talk to people in HR, and everyone in HR gets it. It's the guys at the top, it's people sitting in this room, it's those guys who have the real ability to actually kind of really change the game.
Yeah, I remember those people in the early stages of my career. And talking about the steps firms and individuals can take to really drive change, I just wanted to highlight some research that Level20 published with the LSE's Inclusion Initiative back in June. It's called the Accelerate Report, and it's a report that took the voice of women working in private equity who are in mid-career investment roles in GP firms across Europe. So quite a specific piece of research. We took the feedback from the women directly, and it was worked into a framework called Accelerate, which sets out steps firms can take to help retain these brilliant women and help promote them through their organizations. The reason why I want you to look at that report is because there are some quotes in there, and not all of them are positive. You know, women really enjoy working in this industry, but they often come up against battles that they have to deal with. So some of the points in there around culture, you know, they're hard to read, but there's also some positive change. There are some positive examples of things firms and individuals are doing. For example, making it clear that the woman's in the meeting to run the meeting and not to get the coffee or take the notes. So I'd encourage you to look at the report. Recommendations coming through, and we've been talking about it. Number one, the need for advocacy and allyship to ensure that women are getting on the right deals, that they're getting visibility and opportunities. The importance of transparency. So what does it actually take to get promoted and get to the next level in this industry, as well as supporting both men and women going on to and coming off of maternity and paternity leave. That's really, really important too. So please look at that report. There's a lot in there to digest. Every time I go back into it, I find something new. So please do that. And speaking of advice, Dawid, what would you say, what do organizations do that impedes progress on DEI?
It's subtle stuff, right? Because this is a wicked problem. You know, the sociologists talk about wicked problems, which is like, it's easy to talk about, but how do you find the answer? It's difficult. Yeah. So it's all subtle. In fact, I heard this story recently, which I thought was quite powerful. I'll share it with you. So a young, she's black, she's a very talented lawyer, and she was hired into one of the Magic Circle firms because she was so brilliant. So she arrives, everything's cool, she's being paid a great wage, and it's all going well. But at the same time, there's another guy who's hired, same day as she is, and on paper they look the same. But he's much more kind of what you might call usual suspect. Anyway, over like the next year, she realizes that although her career is moving and moving quite quickly, his is moving more quickly. And she doesn't quite know why. And to begin with, she thinks, well, it's just me, so let me not do anything about it. But then he gets promoted and she doesn't. And then she does get promoted, but he's now been promoted again. And this gap is widening and she can't work it out. And then one day she's at a dinner and the managing partner's at this dinner. And it's great. It's late at night and the wine's flowing and everyone's chatting and it's all good stuff. And then suddenly she hears the managing partner just waxing eloquent about this guy who's, let's call him Tom, waxing eloquent about Tom. And so she listens in to what the managing partner is saying. And he essentially is saying that this guy, Tom, is amazing. And he then says, you know, he reminds me of myself. And here's the thing. She remembers and she works out that Tom has had, his practice just seems to be flying. And it turns out the managing partner's like broken off a chunk of his practice and given it to him. And he's taken him to a bunch of meetings that he shouldn't really have taken him to just because he wasn't senior enough. But hey, Tom's amazing. So he took him to and essentially she works out that Tom is on track to replace the managing partner. That's kind of effectively that's what's going to happen. And the key is that he reminds the managing partner of himself. And she made this interesting observation. She said, I didn't remind anybody of me. Maybe if I had have done, things might have been a little bit different. And I think that kind of, it's subtle, but it happens. And I think that happens in a lot of organizations. And my call out to managing partners and to senior people, senior execs in the room is to ask yourself, do I do that? Look in the mirror when you get home and just say, do I do that? We all do that, right? We look at people who remind us of ourselves and then we say, you know what? They could be me one day, basically. But what about if instead of doing that, you looked at someone who didn't remind you of yourself and said, you know what? She could be amazing. She could sit in this seat one day. And there are organizations doing that, right? Like Man Group has just done that. Man Group, Luke Ellis, a great friend of mine, and he's coming up to retirement, so he's left. And then they put a woman in there and said, look, amazing move that they've done. You know, she's not even from the central part of the business, I don't think, but incredible thing they've done. And they're walking the walk, basically. So that's the kind of cool stuff I think you need to do. But I think in terms of the things that hinder and impede, I think, you know, I've got these like 5 cards that you'll talk to someone in senior management and you'll say, so why isn't there anybody, you know, who looks like this in management? And then there are these 5 cards that get played in different random orders. Yeah. And one of the cards is the first card is, but there isn't anyone. What am I supposed to do? You know, I love people like that, but there isn't anyone. So, you know, the best will in the world, I can't do anything. It's kind of card number 1. And then card number 2 is look, my BAME scores are amazing. You want to see my BAME scores? Absolutely incredible. Which of course, you know, that whole metric just kind of, you know, messes up the stats and allows you to play all kinds of games. And then the third one is, why don't we just hire the best people? I mean, we're just taking the best people, which is what was not happening in the story I just told you. And then I think the fourth one is, I think a lot of senior execs just don't want to go there. It's just too hard to go to this place, so they just don't even go there. In their mind, it's like I just didn't want to go and talk about it. Every time I talk about it, it just messes up. You know, it's just easier just to keep going. And then the fifth one, which I think is the most invidious and the most toxic, which is the fifth card is, yeah, it's not where it ought to be, but we're getting there. We're making progress. We're getting there. We're kind of, you know, we're moving forward. And then nothing kind of happens. And most people in senior management are adept. They're like grandmasters at playing some combination of those cards. But imagine what the world would be like if you didn't have any of those cards, you never played any of those cards, and you try to fix this thing without, and it's a big issue that you have to fix. Young people moving in now don't want to join a firm where you're playing that game. They want you to fix it. They want to see people like them. They want to see people who remind them of themselves. So I think those are some of the things that happen.
Yep, and definitely like throw away the cards, like bury them somewhere. So Addie, just to finish this off, you and I work together on the initiatives coming out the Rose Review into female entrepreneurship. What developments have there been this year, and what should funds and investors be aware of? Great.
Thank you for wrapping up with this. It's a really important thing to cover in this room. And I'll just stick to the investor LPGP part of it. What we've tried really hard to do is reduce the noise and flag posts cleanly and build on really thorough discussions, conversations, exactly like the one you just talked about with Elevate. And the sequencing goes like this, and I really ask you to take this out. Firstly, it would be extremely productive if everyone in this room could read the investment and diversity guidelines. They have been put together very thoroughly, talking to people who work at investment funds, LPs, and in particular founding teams and management teams about what they really experience and what to change. There's no judgment, there's no box ticking, it's just for you to read. So it's www.investmentdiversityguidelines. 2 other quick reference documents, your Elevate piece, to hear really the voice of high potential talent and what they're experiencing, because that's what I think it's a very good nudge theory piece. And the third is the British Business Bank's What Works. All of these documents are open source sharing of this has worked for us, this hasn't worked for us, and it's meant to bring the whole industry forward. If you want to step up a level from that, I would really hope that everyone in this room is now signed up to the Investing in Women Code. There are now 200 funds signed up to it, up 50% year on year. If you are signed up, I would hope it's on your website. And generally when I say that, people go, well, I'm sure it is. Oh, crap, it's not. Let me sort that out. And if you're an LP, please do ask that of the funds you're invested in and question why they are not. And then finally, if you want to go to gold standard or see how much further you can dig, it might be at least worth being aware of or having a conversation with Diversity VC who can kind of litmus stamp it. But as a starting point, please have a flick through the guidelines of best practice for private equity and VC.
Thank you. We could have carried on for a lot longer. There's lots of guidance, lots of reports, lots of things for you to download and read on the way home. I'd like to finish by thanking my wonderful panellists. Thank you.